In the book, what is focused on is not what happens, but rather people's thoughts and ideas about what happens.
Better than food, man.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. I'm selling my first NFT, which is a collaboration between myself and Bruce Stirling John Knox, who is a Berlin-based artist. He created this video in After Effects using a clip of my voice from a review, the Venus and Furs review, and he did this animation, and I just thought it was incredible. So I got in touch with him, and so we're selling this NFT on Rarible. There's a link for it below. Since I put it up like a week ago or so, you know, Ethereum, which is what it's selling for 2 Ethereum, has increased substantially. So, you know, might want to get in on that pretty soon if you are interested. Very much appreciate it if you would have a look. Also, I'm selling these bookmarks. Just got my face on there with a little reminder. I'm not selling them on a website anywhere, but if you want to send me $4 per bookmark plus shipping, you can do that via PayPal, and you can email me below with the information. It's definitely more affordable if you're in the States, but if you want to send me an email below, I can give you a quote, including shipping. I really appreciate it. Helps keep this whole thing going, helps support the show. Thank you so much. So that's all my news. Get that coffee and let's talk about a book. Delicious. Today is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is the first book I've read from Virginia Woolf, the British author who was born in London and active in the first part of the 20th century and considered part of the literary modernist movement. To the Lighthouse was published in 1927. It was her 5th novel, and it's a semi-autobiographical stream of consciousness novel concerning a British family kind of on holiday and the guests in their house and the kind of people on this island, this Scottish island where they're vacationing, where there's a lighthouse nearby, but it's across a bay though. You have to take a boat to get to it. It's not told in their own voices. The voice is third-person omniscient, an untold party, this all-seeing eye of God, an inquisitive ghost. The voice of reality, physical and subjective. The voice of what is, definitively, like in their minds. The entire book is sort of a trip to the lighthouse, but over the course of a decade or so. When she was a kid, Virginia Woolf would go on holiday to a coastal town as well with a lighthouse. And it's been said in this documentary that I've linked to below that those were her happiest moments in childhood. Her sister, Vanessa, said she saw an almost perfect recreation of their parents in these characters, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, and their guests on this Scottish island, on the Isle of Skye, which is this real Scottish island. Looks beautiful out there. There's Mr. Ramsey, who's a well-known author of philosophy, who's sort of a self-involved, ruminating, insecure patriarch. He's very much concerned with legacy and order and kind of obsessed with the idea of being forgotten, you know, like sort of just not achieving the heights that he aspired to, annihilation, basically. The idea that he will not be read in the future. And he's constantly in need of praise, whether from his wife or others. I think he also maintains sort of a pessimistic viewpoint, which may in fact be Virginia's as well, and may be exacerbated by grief. We'll later see. I kind of pictured him being played by Stellan Skarsgård, you know, if there was a film adaptation. He's kind of insidiously tyrannical. Not constantly violent or anything, but has that sort of aura of a loose cannon. He can lose his temper or break things, causes the whole room to go quiet. A lot of tension within this man. Mrs. Ramsey is his wife, who's sort of a source of beauty and stability for the family. Admired by the guests. Admired by almost everyone, I think. There's a local poet named Mr. Carmichael, whose beard has been stained from him smoking opium. Thought that was a nice touch. James Ramsey is their young son, who, in the beginning, wants to go to the lighthouse, but Mr. Ramsey tells him the weather won't be suitable. And James gets the idea, at this point in his childhood, that Mr. Ramsey enjoys being cruel. And that's kind of the planting of this seed of hatred for his father that just grows, as we'll see by the end of the book. Mrs. Ramsey thinks regarding, you know, his being denied the trip to the lighthouse that he'll remember this all his life. I think that's the line from the book, or I'm paraphrasing it, something like that. And sure enough, we discover near the end, he does. See, that's what this is all about. People's interpretation of things and emotions and their conceptions of other people, their perceptions and their different personalities and the different ways that they think and what's important to them and their points of view. Much more so than plot or action, that's what To the Lighthouse is about. And what's so striking about it for the time, you know, what's fresh about it, what's new is the way in which Woolf pulls this off, which is like, you know, almost have you ever seen like Enter the Void, where that, like, you know, the ghost of the kid is like kind of like going from person to person? Well, it's sort of like that, where like this ghost is like embodying the minds of other ones, and you're just able, it's like looking into a window of each person's mind, right? You're able to see their thoughts and desires. You're not hearing it in their voice. You're not reading it in their specific voice, but it's this third party, whose point of view the book is told from. This objective third party, which is able to accurately communicate the thoughts and emotions of many different characters. Lily Briscoe is another character who is a visiting painter doing a portrait of Mrs. Ramsay, and whom I've read, according to Wikipedia, I think. She's sort of like Woolf herself, in that she's pursuing a creative endeavor, but insecure of it as a certain man, a character named Charles Tansley, takes a look at her work, her painting, and comments that women can't paint and women can't write. Perhaps Virginia Woolf was also uncertain and insecure about her own talents, understandably so, as at that time, she and women in general probably received a lot of unfair sexist criticism for wanting to be artists. Though, her father, I read, actually was encouraging her being an author, I believe. I think her family was encouraging her to be an author because it was, an acceptable job for a woman at that time. Even so, I have a hard time believing that it wasn't difficult to create a challenging piece of literature as a woman at that time. In that respect, of course, the book is a huge accomplishment, as it's objectively probably better and smarter than just about anything else that was being published around that time. So the book is told in several different parts. During the day of, before the dinner party, I believe, then the dinner party itself, which is awkward, then 10 years later after several characters have died, and the remaining ones who hadn't been to the home near the lighthouse for 10 years finally take that trip to the lighthouse, which they never made. Maybe the lighthouse represents death. All of it is a meditation on time and people and perception and life and death and family and love and marriage and men and women, bolstered with beautiful descriptions of the surrounding nature. It really illustrates the complexity and difference of thought and experience among people. It was a fresh style for the time, this whole experimental approach, kind of looking through the windows of the minds of each character and what their thoughts and feelings are in relation to the others. One interesting thing about the middle chapter, I think, is that the fates of the characters who died are revealed in very short pieces in brackets or parentheses, I think, with no lengthy explanation of the circumstances, in a huge contrast to the rest of the book. And I think this is kind of the idea behind the book. It's cold and callous in the way that sudden real death is in real life, which is often abrupt and indifferent. Virginia herself experienced a horrific sequence of deaths over the course of 7 years. First her mother, then her sister, then her father. That was when she began to struggle with mental illness. The book is kind of haunted and haunting, and knowing Woolf's fate certainly makes one read it differently. There's plenty of talk of drowning and being subsumed by the ocean in this book, at least from what I remember. Not mentioned so much on Wikipedia, interestingly. Virginia Woolf committed suicide by drowning in 1941 by filling her pockets with stones and walking to a nearby river. There are references to drowning, and they do prophesy Virginia's suicide. I mean, some of them are quite explicit. She had obviously taken leave of her senses. No one had seen her step off her strip of board into the waters of annihilation. Yeah, pretty, I was gonna say dead on, but that's in poor taste. Accurate. In the book, what is focused on is not what happens, but rather people's thoughts and ideas about what happens, their emotional interpretation. I thought her observation and construction and criticism of the male intellectual, the philosopher, the father, the patriarch, was really well done and nuanced and accurate. Maybe more so than in other books by men dealing with the same characters and themes. I don't know, it seems like a plausible argument. She did a good job. I really think she got Mr. Ramsey, pretty accurate. You could call it wistful, but it's even darker than that. For all the kind of stuffy floral refinement that surrounds the book, there's a serious darkness present in the work of Virginia Woolf, emanating from the gut. A true, deep question mark at the heart of her soul. What is the meaning of any of this, since we're all going to perish and be forgotten? The tone of the novel is that of a very smart author who began writing this in a lucid and glassy manner, kind of detached and reflective, sort of shell-shocked, after some tragedy that happened the evening prior. That's what it feels like. That's the tone of the whole book. My favorite part, and the line that really got me, was when Mr. Ramsey, who's an author and philosopher, looks down at a rock and realizes that it'll probably outlast Shakespeare. I think there's a little bit of humor, like dry British humor, but it's I don't know, it's really dry, man. How many men in 1,000 million, he asked himself, reach Z after all? Surely the leader of a forlorn hope may ask himself that and answer, without treachery to the expedition behind him, one perhaps, one in a generation. Is he to be blamed then if he is not that one? Provided he has toiled honestly, given to the best of his power, until he has no more left to give? And his fame lasts how long? It is permissible even for a dying hero to think before he dies how men will speak of him hereafter. His fame lasts perhaps 2,000 years. And what are 2,000 years? Asked Mr. Ramsay ironically, staring at the hedge. What indeed, if you look from a mountain-top down the long wastes of the ages? The very stone one kicks with one's boot will outlast Shakespeare. It wasn't a specific stone, but you know. His own little light would shine, not very brightly, for a year or two, and would then be merged in some bigger light, and that in a bigger still. He looked into the hedge, into the intricacy of the twigs. Who then could blame the leader of that forlorn party, which after all has climbed high enough to see the waste of the years and the perishing of stars, if before death stiffens his limbs, beyond the power of movement, he does a little consciously raise his numbed fingers to his brow and square his shoulders, so that when the search party comes they will find him dead at his post, the fine figure of a soldier. Mr. Ramsay squared his shoulders and stood very upright by the urn. Yeah. That's the thing, I can get kind of like lost in Woolf's sentences. That was one of my complaints with the book, these really long-winded sentences. I mean, they're good, don't get me wrong, but God, sometimes it was just like agony. The image of the father as this overbearing figure, demanding sympathy for the tragedies of his life, affecting the role of the doomed philosophical patriarch, acting. We're the culmination of all the beautiful and terrible things that have happened to us, and that we've done, in whatever proportion or ratio. It's so complex and stupid at the same time. Stupid in the sense of being unable to change it. Complex because of the interlacing tapestry that makes up a personality of a human being, all the different cognitive highways, either smoothly paved like a highway or jaggedly hacked through like a jungle path, connecting this end to that end. What a strange kind of precious, terrifying thing that memory, time, and being create. I don't know, is that consciousness? And that seems to be what the book is about, consciousness and experience. Memory, time, and being. How life sculpts a person's mental raw material. Just really quick, if you're enjoying this review, if you could smash a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. It helps the algorithm and it gets this review to people who would enjoy this book. So, thank you very much. It's also a novel about empathy in the purest sense. By inhabiting each point of view of the main characters, by sort of slipping like a ghost into each mind, one after the other, you begin to have a full view of the characters. So what did I dislike? While there are moments of intense emotion, there's so little joy in the book that it begins to kind of drag. Kind of like if you've ever taken painkillers after surgery or something, you sort of like stare at things and you're like, wow, that's beautiful. And simultaneously, you're just sort of like nodding off in this white haze of non-feeling pleasantness. That's sort of what it's like. It's like you can appreciate that it's beautiful and it has a lot of substance, but it's kind of like a Belle Tarr film or Robert Bresson, both of whom I respect, neither of whom I enjoy. A beautiful landscape of human emotions that's being like covered and uncovered by fog. It's seething with what she describes in the book as this loneliness which was the truth about things. The idea that we all die alone, which for Virginia seems intolerable. And what I would guess, this being the first of hers that I've read, is likely a major and unresolved theme in her work. It's okay. Right? It's okay. I don't know. It's insightful. It's a book that I can see is an accomplishment, that I can firmly say is a good book by a very talented and smart author, but not one that I would ever choose to read again. It's just so bloodless and depressed, my God. There's not a whole lot of desire and obsession. Rather, the whole thing is almost more like, what's the point of desire and obsession? And as soon as you authentically ask and feel that question, I think you're really in trouble. Yeah, because that's sort of the essence of life's propulsion itself. This sort of like unquestioning desire. I want X. Why? Because we're alive in a dynamic universe constructed from solar energy. I don't know how else to put it. That's why. We move, in every sense of the word. But sometimes people stop moving internally, you know? And that's real, true depression, which is just awful and nobody's fault. So better than food? No, not for me. Kind of a drag. I liked it initially after that Shakespeare thing, but after that it just got dull. Like, I just don't care. I often like slow, insightful novels, but this one was just a drag. And, you know, it's basically what I expected, unfortunately. There are some really insightful lines, there's some really good stuff in there, but then a lot of it, I just do not care about the characters, really. I just could not give less of a fuck. Not that I won't read any more Woolf. I certainly will. I think she's very, very talented. I think there was some humor in there, if I remember properly. See, I'm even questioning whether or not there was actual humor in there, like, because it's that dry. It's like, it's so subtle. There's just something sapped and exhausted about the writing. And like, as if it already knows that life is a failure and a bore. At least with most of the other authors I've read who deal with the same subjects, it's either balanced or tempered with a kind of humor, or vitriol, or horror. All of which can be interesting. The combination of all being the difficult but most magnificent success. I guess variation in tone and ideas is what I'm getting at. It's a book really void of humor and pleasure. Yeah, she's really gloomy. But yeah, whatever. Not my thing. I'm looking forward to Orlando though. Like that was the next book she wrote after this. And I think that's probably very different. More energy. As far as stream of consciousness novels and female authors, I prefer Clarice Lispector or Hilst or Anais Nin. Like I feel like Woolf is probably like smarter than Nin somewhere, but I mean like, I just prefer reading Nin. A poor comparison maybe, but I was just thinking about the whole stream of consciousness thing. To the Lighthouse is definitely a stream of consciousness novel. One thing on Wikipedia, I think, mentioned that the embodiment of the consciousness from one person to another was similar to the circling light of the lighthouse. Interesting. No, I just thought that was cool. It's a great book, but I wouldn't be interested in reading it again or taking it to a desert island or a lighthouse island. So you should read it. Well, if you're a big fan of Emily Bronte, Joyce, Proust, I assume Oscar Wilde, although confession, I haven't read him yet. Dorian Gray's on the shelf. Anyways. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by. I take the names of all the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show. I place their names in this mason jar and I pull out a name for every single review I do. Whoever's name I pull out, I send a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is delicious. It's an Ethiopian right now. Fantastic. If you would like to get in on that and help support the show, you can click on the link below or head over to patreon.com/booksarebetterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you. $1 or more will get you access to the patron-only reviews, the Discord channel, plus the Better Than Friday newsletter that I send out every Friday, which is just 5 different things I'm interested in at any given time. Could be books in the pipeline, documentaries, articles, songs, changes week to week. If we have similar tastes, I think you'll enjoy that. Plus, the Discord has great memes. So, you know, it helps make it through the day, right? Unfortunately, international shipping is not included. Sorry about that. Best of luck to all the patrons, and thank you so much. Okay, here we go. Bill M. Thanks a bunch, Bill. I really appreciate it. You're going to receive To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, plus a bag of delicious coffee. Cheers. All right, please subscribe if you haven't already. Please hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, bring a book wherever you go. All right, great to see you as always. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.